All right, Dalton, now we're going to talk about the best edge duo in college football. That resides in Columbus, Ohio with the Ohio State Buckeyes because JT Tuimoloau is our number 8 edge defender in the country and Jack Sawyer is our number 3 edge defender in the country. So we're going to break down both of those players right now, starting with JT Tuimoloau. What makes him a top 10 edge defender in the country in our opinion, Dalton?
He's the ultimate moments guy, right? And I kind of had the same feeling watching him as I did watching his teammate Tyleik Williams, right? Where you go, the high end stuff is really, really high, right? He's a powerful player. He's got a really good spin move. You watch those moments against high end competition. Each of his last 2 games against Penn State, just dominant, man. Just you can see there's so few guys that gave a guy like Olu problems, right? And they had even a right tackle, Caden Wallace, on the other side, who's in the NFL now. And Tuimoloau has just been dominating him, man. He had over a 90 grade in 2022, 7 pressures last year, just bothering the hell out of Drew Aller. His high-end moments are as good as any defensive end in the country. They really are. Those are the 2 things that stick out for me. He's really strong. He's got a really good spin move. He's a solid run defender. It's just the consistency has to get there. But, man, like, first round talent, absolutely. You can just see it. He's got NFL level strength. He gives elite tackles issues. And to me, that's something you always want to see, right? Where it's just like against elite competition, against the Olu of the world, against these Big Ten offensive linemen, against Michigan. What are you giving in those games? And in big moments against big time teams in the fourth quarter, he brings it big time.
Dude, that Penn State game, I can't get out of my head. I mean, really, 2 players beat Penn State in that game for Ohio State because I really thought Penn State played decently in that game, but really Marvin Harrison Jr. cooked him, and JT Tuimoloau that could not stop at all. And he was on that Penn State game in 2022 was the biggest reason for their victory in that game, man, because he was freaking unbelievable. For an edge defender, he had a couple sacks against Sean Clifford in that game, 93.5 grade overall, 94 coverage grade because he had 2 interceptions as an edge defender in that game, and one of them he returned for a touchdown. So 2 sacks, I think 3 pressures total, 2 interceptions, and a pick 6. Like, that is just unbelievable stat line for an edge defender, and that's why, those highs like that, man, are why he's on this list. And, he was a top 5 recruit coming out of high school, really had a good year in 2022 with a 83 pass rushing grade, which is top 20 in the Power 5. Had a 74.5 grade this past year, but, man, the highs that you have with JT Tuimoloau, you could put even higher on this list, man. He could be like a top 5 player on this list just for the highs that we've seen from him alone. But why is he number 8 for us, Dalton, and not higher on this list?
It's consistency, right? And I think when you ask yourself, okay, why are his grades and some of his metrics more good than great? He's got to bring it every snap across every game, right? It's the highs are great, but there's also just moments where he's kind of not all the way there, right? Like I think about a 14.4% pass rush win rate, which is just decent, right? Or his true pass rush win rate is outside the top 150, because it's just not every single snap, right? Or I think about like flashes of dominance. Last year, weeks 6, 7, and 8, he had 4 sacks, right, in 3 games. He didn't have another sack outside of that the rest of the year. So it feels like you're just waiting for him to bring it every single snap and be the dominant player he can be week to week, snap to snap, game to game. Just that's because the high end entices you. It really does, but there's just not enough of it. Like I don't know. I don't want to say it's a motor thing. I think he's got a good motor. It's just not always there, right? There's certain times where he can just kind of get caught in the mud with blockers. There's certain times where he just doesn't bring the extension and the power. Like I just needed every single snap because he has top 4 or 5 talent, like to be higher on this list. He might be more talented than the next guy we're about to talk about, but I just think he has to bring it more consistently. Like he's such a flash player that's the part that makes you hesitant about putting him any higher.
Yeah, it's just consistency, man. So just to kind of show how inconsistent he's been, he had 70+ grades in 4 games this past year. He was below 70 in the other 9 games of the season, and he was below 65 in 6 games last year. So 4 games where he's above 70 and 6 games where he's below 65. Like, it's just the consistency with him is just all over the place for him right now. And I agree. I don't think it's really a motor thing. It's just, like I said, some games are just not really that effective. And I think some of it's got to do with him just playing with better technique, honestly. I think that's something we can get a lot better in some aspects. But, yeah, man, it's just it's so frustrating watching him sometimes. It's like, man, I see those games. I see the 2022 game against a top 15 pick in Olu Fashanu where you're dominating out there. And then the other games against, lesser tackles. And it's just like he can't really do anything. He's almost invisible out there for the Buckeyes. So you want to see him get way more consistent, which is why he's number 8 on this list. But, man, those highs are very high and why a lot of people still have him as a projected first-round pick in the NFL draft. Kind of the opposite story, Dalton, for his teammate Jack Sawyer, who is Mr. Consistency, man. I mean, this guy was excellent as a run defender and pass rusher for the Buckeyes this past season.
Yeah, and honestly, if we're starting with the strengths here, the run defense actually sticks out more. I think he's as fundamentally sound a run defender as any player at any position in the country, right? He's the only edge player last year who graded an 85 in run defense and the pass rush, but his run D tape's a clinic, Max. It is like a coach's clinic. If you are a young defensive end out there looking for tape on how to defend the run and keep contained and play outside in and play the read option and everything else that Jack Sawyer does, man, this is the guy you want to watch. It's just so fundamentally sound. And again, he's a reason that I'm glad PFF and the grading exists, because traditional stats don't do Jack Sawyer justice. They really don't, especially in the run game where there's not a ton of stats other than tackles, and that doesn't tell you a whole lot. Like, he's so fundamentally sound. And then as a pass rusher, fundamentally sound, again, just high motor, high effort. There's times where he showed us he could take over too, right? Against Missouri, he had 7 pressures and 3 sacks in their bowl game. I mean, that's just dominant stuff you can't deny. It could be the pass rush arsenal is getting there, but on the motor, on the effort, on his strength, on his fundamentals, he's as fundamentally sound, maybe the most fundamentally sound edge player in both facets in the entire country.
Yeah, I agree with that, man. You mentioned the only edge in the country with 85-plus grades is a pass rusher and run defender. Among returning Power 5 edge defenders, only James Pierce Jr., our number 1 player on this list, was more valuable than Jack Sawyer this past year, according to our wins above average metric. His whole game really is centered on his power profile at 6'4", 265 pounds. Former top 5 recruit. In fact, he and JT Tuimoloau in the same recruiting class were both top 5 recruits coming out of high school. So it makes sense that they're both here on this list now. He's got to add more pass rushing moves, man. But I mean, he is such a damn good football player overall, and he brings it every single snap. And like I said, kind of the opposite of his teammate and JT Tuimoloau, where he's just so consistent. Game in, game out, snap in, snap out. He's so consistent, man. Really good athlete, too. Plays above the 90th percentile in each of the past 2 seasons in our game athleticism score metric as well. So really athletic player, and just the motor is there. The consistency is there with him. He's a great run defender, like you said, maybe the best in the country at edge. Yeah, Jack Sawyer is a stud, which is why he's our number 3 player on this list, and I think going to be a first-round pick probably in the 2025 NFL draft. What are the weaknesses with Jack Sawyer? Where can he take his game to even further level, Dalton?
I think you mentioned a couple of things, and I was a little surprised to see him as a 90th percentile athlete, because I think just his initial pass rush setup, like his get off and then his hand usage on his first move, as opposed to getting, a good chunk of his pressures on effort and motor and second moves and things like that. I just think the like you just mentioned, the arsenal, if that gets a little bit better, you're really talking about the most well-rounded defensive end in the country, because that's it. He just has to win in the pass rush a little bit quicker. Like, I'm not going to say anything about his run defense. That's clinical. That is like top 50 prospect worthy alone, his run defense. And this is still a guy, an 86 pass rush grade is really, really good. And there's room to improve. If he improves his get off and his hand usage and his initial set of moves, we talked about a couple of guys who could go as edge 1, but man, a little more from Sawyer, and he's not that far from it. Like, there's serious first round potential with how well rounded he is. It's just going to be a matter of his ceiling on his initial moves as a pass rusher.
I agree with you. That's the only thing I really saw in his tape too, is that the pass rushing moves can get a little bit better. And I agree that the get off can get better too. I do think he's a good athlete, which is why you can see tested out as above a 90th percentile in each of the last 2 years. But the moves and the get off If he improves that, man, yeah, he's the best. I already think he's the most well-rounded edge in the country. If he improves those two areas too, man, he could be damn near unblockable on early downs and late downs too, man, for how dominant he is in both aspects. But that's what we got for the best edge duo in college football, Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau, who also might be first-round picks in the 2025 NFL Draft.